But aren't you actually then surprised that they are not going that often on the streets? The coal miners are from time to time. If people in the West wouldn't get paid for a month, they would go on the street.
Well, yes, but one shouldn't compare the situation for a coal miner in Russia with the position in the West. Compare the situation of the coal miner in Russia with the situation of other workers in Russia, or a coal miner situation today versus yesterday and versus tomorrow. I mean, after all, people make choices within the world of choices as they understand them. Coal miners are relatively well paid compared to other sectors. Compared to
sure, but if you're not being paid,
well, it's a very big question, and I agree with you. If you're not being paid, how long can this patience last? There are a couple of answers. One is that so long as workers aren't being paid, they tolerate the situation in the hope that things will improve. And they tolerate the situation because they fear the alternative is worse. In a steel town near here where I've been, during the winter, although people were not being paid, they needed to stay employed on the record of the list of the company in order to receive the meal, the lunch meal, in order for their children to be able to use the daycare center, and because the factory, there were 2 or 3 factories in the city employing everybody, and because fuel was cut off to homes during parts of the day, the factories were the only warm places to go. So there are good reasons why people would be afraid of worse.
But if we're talking about these kind of things, how do you foresee the future of... then actually you're a pessimist about the future.
Well, I don't know that I'm a pessimist. I'm simply not an optimist. I think it would be much fairer to say nobody can predict what will happen in Russia because the conditions here are quite unique. I know that in the West, people continually look for the emergence of a fascist leader or the phenomenon of fascism in Russia as they saw it, or they think they saw it alike in Germany and Italy 60, 50 years ago. And there are the preconditions from sociological point of view for making some comparisons. On the other hand, I think Russia is quite different. And second, the revolution in Russia has destroyed most forms of central power. The police control very little. The army controls very little. It was very difficult, we all know now, for the president to get even 3 tanks into position to shell the parliament, and had to beg his generals, Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Interior, for hours on the night of Sunday and Monday in October a year ago to support him. That means that central power is extremely weak, and that means it's very difficult to create the sort of centralized authoritarianism that everybody associates with fascism in Germany or Italy, which are small, cohesive countries by comparison with Russia.
So fascism is not a real threat, or Western fascism is not a real threat.
I think.
But so how do you foresee the political panorama for the next couple of years? What is filling up the political vacuum? Who is filling up the political vacuum?
Well, I think the vacuum is being filled with more of the same, of many different movements and many different ideas and strategies competing with one another for short-term advantage. I think the net result is that Russia will muddle along in much like this condition for quite a long time. I don't see the government being able to assert itself. I don't see the flow of capital being able to transform the economic prospects. I don't see that the government's policies can make Russia competitive in those areas of production in which it would need to be competitive to survive. And I see the government trying to make short-term concessions to preserve this fragile political balance between itself and Parliament, between the centre and the regions. And I think the country will totter along in that way.
Putsch?
Who would make the putsch and how would they do it? And what would they have gained? What would they gain if they won? We are, in a sense, in a situation of continuous putsch. We were after the Constitution ceased to apply. And if we define the putsch as an illegal grab at power, we have been in this position for more than a year now. And power, such as it is, if you stretch it, it loses its elasticity, it loses its ability to command. Once the framework of law was destroyed and not replaced, and once you eliminate consensus, we have a continuous putsch, in my opinion. And the question is, you're asking, does somebody replace Mr. Yeltsin as president? I don't think so for the time being. Why would anybody want to do that? I mean, I understand that people regard him as the opposition regards him as a symbol of a wrong-minded policy, and they want to remove him. But they are by far weaker than he is. But he's not very strong. And for everyone else who's in a position to remove him, it's enough to leave him be while they get on with asserting their own best interests. And what's going on here is, it's clear. Massive amounts of state property continue to change hands. Capital is being accumulated. There are huge winners and there are huge losers. And none of it's within the framework of a consensus or a law or even of a government policy. I call that a sort of state of continuous transfer of power. If you want to make it a bit more dramatic, call it a putsch.
Why is it for the opposition? If we're talking about what is important for people, for the electorate, that is that they can concentrate on one person, they can look up to one person. You call it the Tsar syndrome, maybe. Why is it so difficult for the opposition to find one person who could unite, or who could give leadership to the opposition?
Well, because the opposition comes from different ideological origins and different parts of the social order.
Yeah, but they have all one thing the same, and that they are against the president.
Yes, but that's almost the only thing that unites them, just as the supporters of the president, the extremely badly misnamed Democrats of Russia, have only support of the president as their unifying force. So you have disparate factions and cliques, very similar to 18th century England or 18th century, 19th century United States. American politics look very similar if you look carefully for a moment, and you discover the president's not at all as strong as the American Constitution, the American people believe. So here you have communists recruiting their support primarily outside Moscow, in small and medium-sized cities. You have agrarians gathering their support from rural sector. Zhirinovsky gathers his support from people who want to register a vote of opposition. Very large number of people have stopped voting altogether in opposition to the whole choice. And you don't have agreement among these contending elements of opposition about how to restore the economy, whether to restore Soviet Union or not, how to preserve the property that's been transferred already, or whether to renationalize some of it.